Sean and Carl are going to kind of chime in too. So we're kind of this is really more of a panel, and I have some rough slides to kind of give us talking points along the way. But
this is where you show us how to do all the cool things. Is that
something like that?
Good.
We're also, you should see the Q&A thing pop up on the side if you hit the little I don't know what you call that button at the top, but there's a button
activities.
There's shapes.
There you go. If you hit that button, you should see a Q&A. You can submit and vote questions, and we'll have some question time at the end. And this definitely is not going to be any kind of all-encompassing G Suite thing. Again, I'll throw some slides up just to kind of give us a general, again, kind of to walk us through the topics I plan on talking about. Here we go. So also, I probably even already used the word G Suite. So did Jason and others there. If you don't know, G Suite is no more. Google Workspace is the term that they're using today. And again, there's I think a lot of other behind the scene changes. I know currently the nonprofit and education accounts aren't super affected by that, which most churches are one of those two. It really depends on when you signed up. Our account is actually on a legacy education edition as well, which before they offered official nonprofit, they would put some on there. So likely everybody in this group, if you're on I almost said G Suite again, Google Workspace, you're on one of those two. I'm actually going to kick this over to Carl to kind of talk a little bit about the different kind of editions and tiers and what from a billing and what these editions mean standpoint. I don't think you'll have any details about what that means specifically for nonprofits and education from a cost or whatever standpoint, but more of again, just kick it to him to talk for a little bit.
Yeah, 100%. Okay. Obviously, like Jonathan said, this is brand new. I didn't know I was in here until about 45 minutes ago, but I love it. So there's a lot of stuff that's happening beyond just the rename. Like the rename, I actually kind of guess that the rename from G Suite to Workspace is probably them trying to figure out how they're going to usher in a whole lot of changes that they wanted to make anyway. And they were like, hey, if we change the name, we're going to have a little bit more cover for the changes that we want to make the products contained within that name than if they just made those changes and kept the name the same. So I think I've said a few times, I think Google Workspace sounds more like a product than a suite of products. So I actually would guess that it'll probably change again in Google fashion. So don't get too tied to this one either. But yeah, so I'll talk just briefly on the commercial side, and then we'll spend a little bit of time and talk about some of the conversations that I've been and my team has been having with Google over the last couple of weeks and some of the frustrating things we've been having, frankly. Google G Suite, Google Apps, being the first or Google Apps for Business or something like that, whatever the first name was. That's been around for a long time now. And every time that we've had a transition, when it went from Google Apps and then we had the education and then and then we had the nonprofit and we had the enterprise and then we had G Suite, these are almost on the back end as best has been explained to us. And sometimes it's really hard getting very clear understanding. I actually kind of guess that not a lot of people have a really clear understanding of how exactly this works on the services side behind the scene. But these were actually somewhat different products that you go to through a place, and there is a very consistent UI on top of them. But in the background, like Jonathan was talking about, my personal G Suite for Business free account that I've had since 2004, maybe, like it's been a long time now that I've had that account, is different than a G Suite commercial account that we would have set up a few months ago, is different than our legacy which is different than our legacy nonprofit Google account that we use at Chapel Hill, which is different than a new nonprofit account that I maybe have set up for a food pantry that we're helping out with. Like, these are all different products behind the scenes, even though they have a consistent UI. So what Workspace is, and with this change to Workspace, I'm not going to talk about all the app side of it. That's something that other people are going to talk about in the meantime. But there seems to be a very concerted effort by Google to say, we're going to go ahead and get rid of all of these separate systems in the background and get everybody actually migrated into Workspace. And they're actually using the phrase migration. That doesn't seem to be something that's taking us a lot of effort, in that, like, we got to burn down our tenant and build a new one. But there is differences in features that are coming along with this. There are differences. They're going to talk about, like, some of the stuff happening in chat where there is a new and an old, and we're going to the new. But the conversation continues to be around, we're going to go ahead and consolidate all of our business accounts into these new Workspace products. And there's kind of a basic and a pro and then an enterprise edition of Google Workspace for profits. And what has been happening is they've been starting to contact us on the business side and say, hey, you're going to go ahead and have to adopt these new plans. So that means we're in some cases needing to spend more money, or we are in some cases needing to take less features. But that's happening on some of our large enterprise stuff where we're under contract. They're coming back and saying, hey, at the next contract renewal, you are only going to be offered options to go ahead and move over to Workspace. This kind of got some of us asking a question, well, what about nonprofits? And originally, when Workspaces was announced, there was no information about nonprofits. There was no information about education. Well, over the last month, and we can potentially add some of this later. I don't have a lot of the links here. They are all public on Google's help page for Google Workspace and the upgrade to Workspace, though, at this time. But we've been asking these questions, and now we're starting to get some real clarity saying nonprofits are going to have to move too. So we're going to, and that's up there right now. I posted about it in the main CITN under Google Workspace, and under the Microsoft 365 and Google Apps over there in Slack, maybe a week or two ago. But basically they're saying, go ahead and get ready to move, and we're going to make you move sometime. Now, we keep asking for clarification what sometime means, and they just go coming months. So unfortunately, I don't have a lot of, like, what precisely that timeline is. It's all a little bit murky, but they have gone ahead and published now that there is going to be an upgrade process that's required. They're actually advocating for people to do it now. There's actually a walkthrough on the FAQ page for Google Workspace upgrades about how nonprofits are going to upgrade. And there is a free tier, but the free tier is getting all the limitations of the basic tier of Google Workspace for Business. And then there are an upgrade to Pro and an upgrade to Enterprise for nonprofits at $4 a user a month and $8 a user a month, respectively. So we're really preliminary. Like, I guess in probably like 8 or 12 weeks, hopefully we're going to know a whole lot more. But it's enough that on our side, where we have nonprofits and businesses that are still using G Suite, we're kind of going ahead and starting to budget for, hey, next year, there's a good chance that we're going to be put into a circumstance that we have to do that. Maybe they won't. Maybe there's going to be some backlash. Maybe they're going to choose to walk that back a little bit. But we've kind of, over the last 6 or 8 weeks, gone from, does this affect nonprofits and does this affect education, to it doesn't affect education. Right now, education plans stay as they are. It does affect nonprofits. You're going to be made to move. If you're under contract, it will happen at the next contract renewal. If you're not under contract, in the coming months. Yeah, so there's a lot of stuff moving there, and I don't have a firm, like, by this date, but it's enough that you guys should dig in. And if it's enough that if you're using a lot of G Suite and you're, Google Workspace. If you're using a lot of Google Workspace and you don't currently spend any money on that line item, you may need to add that to your budget for next year, just as an in case, and hopefully we don't need it.
Yep. That's great, Carl. Thanks for sharing that. I mean, I think that's something that, like you said, we all need to evaluate and look into, because it's you know, there's we don't know how it's going to affect everybody right now. But For me, I know I don't know how much of the case this is now, but I know in the past, at least, there are many churches and stuff that are like, oh man, I'm switching to G Suite or Google Apps or all the different names because it's free. For me personally, I would pick it. It's not about cost. It's the platform that we prefer. So I think, but that's a decision that each church would need to make. But
Yeah, I'll say we still love G Suite. Like we think it has a place, and that place
Yep.
isn't everywhere.
Yep.
And them saying, "Hey, it's worth a little bit of money." In some ways, we take that our position as a consultancy and as a church, because like I kind of live in both of those worlds. Is that we're excited for there to be a little bit of clarity around, hey, this is what it costs, this is what it is, because there's a little bit of us that's like, man, a free service by Google is not a place that we feel really secure in, but a paid service by Google, we're a little happier about that, oddly enough.
Yep. So hey, just moving on to the next topic. And again, some of these slides were copied directly from a friend's Google marketing presentation. So bear with me. Some of them may be too much information, but I'm just kind of giving me topics to talk along the way. So video chats in general became highly important for every church or organization or anything like that. And Zoom obviously kind of skyrocketed and quickly dominated. And I think at least in our culture and even the people around, it's like Zoom became the verb. And there were for us, even how we handled that, our team had kind of already standardized on Meet, and I love Meet as a product, but I would agree at the beginning of the year they were behind tremendously compared to Zoom or even Teams. And I think they've definitely stepped up and responded quicker than I feel like I've ever seen Google release something and make progress in a product. And even this feature right now, where like just 5 months ago you could only see I don't know how many people it was, but I think it was no more than 9, if you could even see that. It wasn't many at all. So I mean, again, they've increased the limits. Some of the feature sets in Meet are dependent on tier. I mentioned we're on an education tier as well, and we pay for the enterprise upgrade option, so we get every feature there is, but it's reasonable cost for the package we're on. I'm very anxious to see what pricing and all that stuff does with the workspace stuff we just talked about. But one of the other relatively new things, they've rolled this out, I believe, to every plan now, is the ability to record. One-click recording, and at the end of your meeting, the file is just in Google Drive, can be played directly from Google Drive, doesn't have to be uploaded anywhere. It's a very simple process. And also, our team adopted this as well, is the ability to live stream a group video chat. So for instance, our application was right at the beginning of COVID, we typically did at least a once a month video all staff, and we actually broadcast it to a page that was just a web player in our church management system, and literally like filmed it with a camera and used our normal streaming provider to get it there. We migrated this to the ability to, you can just have all of us join this video chat and stream that to up to 100,000 people internally within your domain, and all that's included. Again, this specifically says, I think this is based on Google Workspace, the little tag at the top that said it requires enterprise. But to me, that's been a highly beneficial feature that they have said they intend to change that to not only support in domain, but to support out of domain as well. The best part of it is, again, it's a one click. Like I could click a button in the bottom corner of the meeting and hit start live stream, and have a different link that anybody on our domain could watch. And so again, it's funny. This is says I don't have access to this image, but they've done some other things like live translated closed captions and some noise cancellation stuff. It's been pretty cool. So they've done a lot of things. But the big feature I know for our church specifically of why like we were almost had our hands forced to roll out some form of Zoom as well is this breakout group concept. And even like I think what we're about to go back and do together with the CITN group is the ability to take a large group of people in a video chat and break them up into individual groups. And that functionality is now in Google Workspace as well. And they've just done a ton of stuff this year specifically with Meet, even with call quality and investigative tools to understand what's happening. Also have great room system experiences and all of those kind of things. So I wanted to just because I think that's probably been one of the, I'm sure everybody in the room has had many conversations about video chat platforms or if you already were using Meet or you're like shake your head because somebody just bought a Zoom account or bought 10 Zoom accounts or whatever that is. And, for us, ultimately, again, Meet was not comparable for a feature set earlier, but I think they've made strides this year. So Sean, I don't know if you have anybody else has anything to add to that, or Carl. Actually, here's the tiers that show the limitation. I think somebody asked about Q&A, so it looks like the Q&A and all that kind of stuff is that top tier plan.
We do not have Enterprise or Business Plus or Enterprise Plus. We started like you with an education account, and at some point behind the scenes, they decided to change something where we're in some form of a nonprofit account or maybe some kind of limbo in between. Getting a straight answer on that is challenging, but kind of taking one step back, I think a general philosophy standpoint, and this is going to be talked about, I'm sure, on the third week when we talk about budgeting, is to remember, even though that we're getting something for free, it's really wise to make sure leadership understands that model, that whether it's Microsoft with their Azure or M365 or whatever it is, or whether it's Google or whether it's somebody else, making sure leadership knows, hey, this is essentially a form of donation to us. And if that donation policy changes, we're going to have to come up with a plan for that. And it could cost somewhere in this range of dollars, because if Google changes their mind and doesn't, or their policies or Microsoft changes their mind, then we have to kind of be ready for that. And so from our org, we recently, the free recording functionality went away recently, where we used to be able to record as part of the COVID, relief thing. And now we can't anymore in our Google G Suite workspace, whatever we call it, domain. We cannot record anymore, but we can do Q&A. And I think we can do polls, but we cannot do breakout rooms. So, that's going to be a conversation we're going to have of, is it worth it to upgrade every account in the domain? One of the challenges we have is we do have volunteers that we give accounts to. And so the cost structure changes dramatically if you're paying for enterprise feature set for all of those. But I do know that it is kind of frustrating that it changes, but we do currently have the Q&A and polls. I don't think anybody's using it. I've only had one staff person ask about recording, so not a whole lot of interest so far in keeping that long term.
Yeah. Cool. Hey, just to kind of keep us moving, and we plan on. Don't forget, you can submit questions in the Q&A, and we can kind of get to those at the end. So I also just kind of wanted to talk about Google Chat, previously Hangouts Chat. It might be, or previously even before that was just Hangouts. And we've talked on the theme of Google and naming. I definitely like to make fun of them with this kind of thing because they just love to change the name of things. I do feel like that a lot of the things that I see them doing are hopefully getting closer to a more cohesive strategy, because I feel like I've watched them fumble with chat platforms for years now, and in both the consumer space and the business space. When products like Teams and Slack have dominated, it's baffled me why Google can't release a product to really compete. And I think even, but I mean, to be fair, even the term Hangouts as a business term is odd. I think a simple name of now this product is called Google Chat, and it's just took them a lot longer to get it to the point of where it needs to be even today. Things like being able to chat with people outside of your organization. You can do that now, but when you chat with them, they're still using the traditional Hangouts client, which looks completely different than your client and has different feature sets. Up until November the 16th of this year, all rooms require threaded messages only. Every conversation forces a thread. They're finally getting rid of that. So I think they're starting to make changes and hopefully blend this stuff together. I mean, and even things like the chat that's in this video chat is not integrated with the chat that's here. And it's just like all of those little things just seem disjointed. But there is a plan to kind of get there, and Google's established that and told some of those dates, especially with how it affects consumers, but also business accounts as well. And I think Sean's going to talk a little bit about their transition away from traditional Hangouts into chat.
Yeah, so we're a really heavy Chromebook organization, and as part of that process, we automated having Hangouts enabled on everything. So part of the question was, what are we going to do when we've got this new thing coming? It has better feature set, especially when you talk about the few people who aren't using a Chromebook. What does that experience look like for them? The big one for us was getting to the point where you're using a progressive web app structure instead of a fat client on situations like Macs or Windows machines. So essentially, my whole point here is you're going to have, as we've talked about, it's a moving target, and you got to kind of learn to adapt to that. And so part of that is you have to come up with a plan. Google will help you with some of that, but you're going to have to kind of know what your users are, and you need to plan for this migration from Hangouts to chat if you haven't done it already, because Google will probably maybe someday force you slightly, easily, or forcefully to change. And it's a good thing. Chat is a much better experience. And the good news is it can be mostly transparent to your staff. So we did this in a way where, yes, we told them it was coming, but the reality is whether they were using a Chromebook, a Mac, or a Windows computer, all they knew was we made some changes, stuff still works, bing, bang, boom, done. So for us, it started with internal documentation. So that was like how-to articles, things like that. And then we force installed the Chat Progressive Web App, the PWA. We did that for all platforms, whether it's a Chrome browser or a Chrome OS device. And then we just made a date that we set Chat Preferred everywhere. And then from then on, we got a much richer experience. There's a couple articles that you can click on and bookmark. Well, maybe you can't. Okay, well, I'll put those in the chat. But essentially, one of the great things about the new chat functionality is previously there was a really rough edge feature set available. So now when someone shares a Google Doc with me, I get a really nice modern experience for knowing that information has been shared with me. That's all I have to say about that. If you have questions about it, then put it in the Q&A.
Sorry, I was muted. Another interesting kind of new thing. This is something that personally, I've looked at again, just back to the overall strategy from Google's standpoint, and I've wondered like why they did not enter a space like enterprise voice. And even historically, seeing what Teams does in the kind of enterprise voice space, and before that, Skype for Business and all of those products, and then we kind of, I've personally known and had experience with Google Voice on the consumer side for years, and always been just intrigued by the concept. And so I always wondered why they didn't release that for businesses with just a little bit of administrative features, and turn it into a true enterprise voice platform. And in case you don't know, they have done this now. It's definitely not going to be as feature filled as some of the other options out there. But they actually even have official desk phone support. We've experimented with it, and I think for probably most simple situations, it could be a great fit. It's a web-based soft phone as well as physical desk phone, and texting and calling, all that kind of stuff. We've used a cloud-based system for a few years and have been happy with it. But the idea of all of that folding into G Suite, Google Workspace, or whatever is intriguing as well. So I don't have any info other than just like back to the Google doesn't really do a good job of marketing. You may not even know that they took a product like Google Voice, that name has been around for so long, and they actually do a whole lot more with it. You can port numbers in and out. I've done that, and it's pretty straightforward process.
My main complaint there right now is the pricing.
Yeah. So yeah, you might have saw when I say I ported my number in and out. You might have saw, if you had Jared on your screen, you saw him smirk. So we were accepted about a year before it released into the beta process, and I ported my primary mobile number into it, only to be told, actually, the product is not going to support porting out. And my number was trapped there for about a year. So that's why he laughed. But after they released it, but again, it was a beta product. I'm the type person that's like, beta, who cares? I'm going all in. So that was interesting. But after they finally came out of beta, and the product's progressed a ton since that beta as well. But I used it personally for all my communication for about a year during beta. But so again, it's interesting. I don't have any real world rolled out in production experience, but I think it's just intriguing that they're trying to hopefully check all the boxes of what church organization would need.
It's not mine. I'm adjacent to an organization which has rolled it out into production and is incredibly happy with it.
Yep.
Again, it's just a small anecdote, but I'm very adjacent to that.
Cool. Well, we'll keep it going to the next slide. So another interesting kind of trend that it feels like I've seen this year is Google is seemingly trying to get more into endpoint management. Again, I think this is the start of them getting into this. I'm also not going to sit here and recommend that they would be a platform to consider for this right now, but just some of the steps that they're taking are surprising and just interesting for what their long-term play is. Specifically, again, I just have a few slides. Well, I mean, for one, and this is even kind of unrelated to that, but even the ability to do LDAP-based authentication directly into G Suite and kind of handle that bridge. But you can also there's tons of stuff even from the MDM perspective. We historically a few years ago used Google for MDM. It was a very limited feature set. One thing that they just kind of surprisingly released out of the blue earlier this year is they actually added Apple DEP support. If you're not familiar with that, it's just a process of where like devices that come from Apple can be pre-enrolled in your management platform. That's not something I would have expected Google to do, but they did. And another big surprise is they released management support for Windows 10. I would have not expected that either, but the ability to, again, very loose quotes, manage Windows 10 devices in Google. We have not experimented with this either, but it sounds intriguing because we're we also don't have a lot of, we're primarily Chrome users as well, but we definitely have some Windows 10 devices out there, and currently those are logging in with traditional AD, and our default SSO prompt we always try to make be Google. The idea of using a Google sign-in for a Windows 10 client is interesting. I don't think they're ready to go with this yet, too. This is more of a like, hey, we've got some stuff ready. Here you go. This not full featured, and there's some settings you can configure and some update type things you can manage. But to me, this just kind of paints a bigger picture of like maybe what they're. I think that I guess they're maybe trying to be like kind of a one-stop. I mean, almost like Microsoft is doing as well with all the Intune and endpoint management stuff that they do as well.
I'm going to jump in on you for 1 second right there, because you said a lot of things, and I don't, maybe you know this and you haven't equated it back, but you do know that Google went on a little bit of a hiring spree in the third and fourth quarter of last year and pulled Javier, I forget his last name, over from Microsoft, from the cloud team at Microsoft to lead G Suite with the remit of saying, our growth in this platform has largely stalled out. And how do we go ahead and redo that? And a lot of the questions and a lot of the brains that they brought over from Microsoft are saying, how can we act a little bit more holistically?
Yep.
And they're also, frankly, tasking them how to grow the revenue share. And so, and in answering that question, you're going to see more of this chart right here of saying that historically, there's only been a few reasons why you would jump up to enterprise or one of the higher tier plans, storage space being the really big one. And you're going to see continued segmentation and increasing of that. I don't think it's going to be like Microsoft where you have 87 SKUs sitting on top of each other, and how do we manage the interaction in those SKUs? Like that is a problem Microsoft has. I don't think that Google is looking to replicate that problem, but I do think that you're going to continue to see more and more activity in some of these higher SKUs. Hence why I'm really of the belief that they are going to go ahead and force these upgrades into workspace, because that's kind of the only way that they can start, pushing these things out and having a chance at getting some of the revenue, which is part of Google's main driver right now.
And I'd also mention too that one of the things we haven't talked about in this, but is very intriguing from an IT perspective, is Google Cloud, as an IDP, as an ID provider, their full integrated functionality that you do get when you jump up to enterprise, unless they've changed the feature set. But it used to be that when you jumped up to that enterprise level, you essentially got their alternative to Azure Active Directory, which in a lot of ways has features that Azure does differently. And it's kind of six one, half dozen the other, but some of the things they do around access control and those kind of things are really fascinating and interesting and very enticing. To me, that was one of the reasons I originally thought to myself, maybe we upgrade. Was not the meet recording functionality. It was, can this completely replace the idea of running something like Azure AD? Because if I can set up realistically context and application aware access for everything people use, that is a pretty nice safety and security platform.
For sure. So one other, just kind of one other random topic I was going to tag along at the end of this before we kind of move to Q&A was, I know Sean mentioned that they're big Chrome users. We are as well. Just kind of a few random, bullet points of Chromebook thoughts I've had about this past year. And I think I guess these are two kind of pretty big topics. One related just into life stuff in general related to Chrome, and that's been big on our mind this year because we've been in the Chrome world for a while, and we this year have had like about 400 Chrome devices that reached the end of life, and we had them in production for about 5 years, and they could have kept functioning fine. They were great for their purpose. They were fixed kiosks doing check-in, and they're great, and we're replacing them because they're end of life. And that end of life date is established when it's released. And Google has continued to Google has continued to kind of make tweaks to that. And we were actually lucky of we had two main devices we used. One of the, like all of these devices from our first Chrome rollout were all supposed to expire this year. They just randomly added an extra year of life to one of them. And earlier this year, they actually announced that every device released in 2020 and forward will be released with 8 years of Chrome support. So as long as performance and all of those other factors are okay, the device can actually last 8 years. And in kiosk type scenarios, at least for our experience, that's realistic. And even when I said these 400 devices are still fine, these are check-in devices that we spent $200 on 5 years ago, and we just replaced them with other $200 devices, that will last another.
Incredible.
So it's incredible, value as well. And it still killed me to replace them when it wasn't necessary, And I think one interesting thing that I know has been talked about, this is pure, I say rumor. I mean, there's blog posts and stuff about it that go in depth explaining, even from like commits to the Chrome project, if they're trying to separate Chrome OS as an OS from the actual Chrome browser. And my hope is, and there's thoughts of like trying to extend that life even further. So I hope that that's in Google's play. I would think that I don't think they're really making anything off of hardware sales. So I would think that it would be in their interest to extend life if possible, but who knows? And then just kind of another big, I think another big thing just to make sure everybody's aware of anybody in this room that's using Chrome, Google Cloud Print, which was the standard way to handle printing from the time Chromebooks first started supporting printing until 12/31 of this year, when Google shuts Cloud Print down. It will no longer function. Any business that's using it, any school that's using it, any consumer that has a printer that's directly linked to a Google account, it will all stop functioning. And so everybody needs to make sure they have a plan for that. Google's suggested partner to resolve this is Papercut. It's a print management platform. We luckily were already using this platform. We haven't actually, even though it's a month and a half away, we haven't fully cut over to. We're still using Papercut. Papercut managed Cloud Print for you. They have another solution called Mobility Print. I believe that's what their terminology is, that we have working, and we just haven't actually migrated users to it. And it, like when I go to print, it gives the user a nasty warning that your printer will stop working in 12/31. Please contact your administrator. But we're resolving that soon as well. But it's as far as technical details, Sean, I think you chatted me even beforehand asking about how we're solving printers. I can't speak to a lot of the technical. We can gladly, I can connect anybody that has questions to somebody on my team that can help with that. But it'll function basically the same way that Cloud Print did. Just Google's not handling the infrastructure. So really,
I was about to say that. I was going to say that kind of transitions us into Q&A. If anybody has any other questions, Sean and Micah both asked about printing. Does Sean and Micah, does that kind of answer your question that y'all had?
Yeah, I mean, I have Papercut, and I was, somewhat aware of the mobility option, so I'm going to look into that some more. This Toshiba printer, I don't think was ever Google Cloud Print enabled to begin with. And so I've just been printing via IP, and it's given me, the most basic driver. And I've had requests to do more, featured print jobs, such as like label printing. And I'm like, I don't know what to tell you. So I'm going to look into this mobility option. I mean, we've got Papercut, and it's, fully functional for us, but I'm not using a lot of the features. So I'm going to look into that.
Yeah, and it pop into the church IT community Slack or whatever, or forum about some of those things. We've had people tell us those kind of stories sometimes. I need to do X, and the reality is it's something you need to do every 2 years.
Right.
We have some people that specialize in graphic design stuff, and they don't use a Chrome OS device because they need apps that don't work on Chrome.
Oh yeah.
And so sometimes it's just a matter of coordinating them. They're trying to do their own thing instead of work through that department. But we also have a couple situations where you've got non-technical users that they just need to get from point A to point B. And so we've been able to use tools like Papercut functionality to say, hey, if you need to do this, follow this guide to create your document in Google Docs or whatever you're doing it in, and then use a Papercut function called web print that we have with our version of Papercut, that they just drop that file in a web browser and then it spits it out of the production level machine in the format that they expect it, like a booklet. So there are different ways to do it. There are different tools. I will say that, like, if someone is expecting the full Microsoft Office experience of different tabs and whatever, and I can choose this and that in my printer, that does not exist currently in any Google Chrome OS platform I've seen. But when we looked at migrating to Chrome, we actually did a lot of research with our staff and found that that was kind of a red herring reason to not change. Of the reality is, I only make that booklet once a year.
Right.
Well, aren't you supposed to be working with the communications team on that? And what it came down to was a conversation with leadership to say, okay, is it my job to solve everybody's problem, or is it my job to have understanding of what we're providing and provide for those things well, and then figure out the other things as we go?
Yep. If I'm perfectly honest with you, I haven't heard that question since COVID, which we haven't been in the office as much.
Yeah, I mean, I'm looking at as myself, when can we, how do we re-architect our copy release when it comes up due next time?
Yeah, that's the main thing. Something I've been working on a lot.
Yeah, not that it's bad, but it's just
the
world has changed, and
right.
I'll say that in our environments, we have a lot of very multi-platform environments. Like, I don't think I have a all Chromebook environment that we care for. I also don't have an all Windows environment or an all Mac environment or an all whatever environment. Like, we are just heavily multi-platform. So Papercut is a really, really cool option. The other one that we've had a lot of success with is a platform called Printix, which is another one as well that has a lot of answers for dealing in really heavily multi-platform environments. And your conversation about the web page based printing in order to do a web drop-off print in Papercut, we sometimes do the same thing by just specialized printer workflows attached to a name, and so they see the same printer with a different code on the end of it. So yeah, you can answer those questions. Show up in CITN Slack, and I'm sure a lot of us would be willing to dump you with some facts.
Or tell you what doesn't work and you should avoid.
Shared drive file stream, best practices. Anyone discontinued on-prem file servers for drive, third-party backups was a question Kill asked. For us, so one really cool feature of shared drives that changed this year, I believe is fully rolled out. This is another feature I know we were part of the beta on, was the ability, when shared drives are at first it was called, again, back in Google fashion, it was released as team drives. Then they changed the name to shared drives. But it's just a way to have shared organization on files where permissions are managed at the top level. And my first thought was, man, this is awesome. This is a good way, so we don't have to deal with the whole this user left and files get moved, like where are files and who owns them. And then I was like, wait, you can't share folders underneath the top. You can only manage it at the top level. And all of our users that are like used to the flexibility of Google were like, this is awful, So we kind of used it, I know, internally, like on our team for a while, and dealt with limitations, but chose to not really mass push that out or let people go wild with it until that feature changed. And
it changed this week for us.
Okay. Yeah. So
Really?
that's great. Yeah. I knew it was rolling out fully for everybody. I think that will solve most everyone's problems. The other thing to consider is, and this changed along the way too, but there are limits of how many files and folder depth can exist in a shared drive. Our finance team reached that limit, and we had to I think it's been changed to where it would be way less likely to reach now. But originally when Team Drives rolled out, I think it was something like no more than 50,000 files. And when we were trying to migrate there, so back to the question of we absolutely don't really have any on-prem file storage other than kind of like bulk storage for video team and creatives and stuff like that.
We don't either. We migrated all when we got rid of on-prem AD.
So I do not have any kind of document that shows best practices or anything like that.
We use the same guidance whether we're talking about Google World or Microsoft World, and it's been a lot easier because any tenant, our tenants are now on to the same. We can share folders and stuff outside of shared drives, so that's been much easier. But basically, a thing that's owned by a department or is default shared amongst a definable group of people, we try to put it into a shared drive. And things that are primarily a person and maybe are ad hoc collaborated on random happenstance, those are regular Google Drive files, and that's not perfect. And we don't kind of aim for perfect. Frankly, we just kind of aim to, we just kind of aim for mostly a happy path, It
doesn't exist.
No, but sometimes the happy path is not the thing we would first choose. And so, we don't get too nitty gritty about it. And we know we're going to have to clean some stuff up every once in a while, and that's fine.
Hey, Sean, do you want to talk through the getting rid of on-prem AD? I don't know what you mean by that. I don't know if you mean you have traditional AD servers at somewhere else, or is it just gone? You don't have AD at all.
We have. So I first of all, I'd like to answer the question of backups. We do pay for spanning. It is not inexpensive. It is not the most expensive thing ever, but they back up our full Google environment. I believe in Amazon is what they use on the back end. And they back up all shared drive content. So again, that's one of those things where I've used both Backupify and spanning, and we're with spanning now. So anyways, in terms of on-prem, so our process was essentially one, get people using Chromebooks. We were already using Google. Once they start using Chromebooks, the need for Office and those kind of things goes away. Two, IT essentially did an audit of all internal AD file shares and other kind of internal AD resources that we were kind of dependent on in some way, and just come up with a plan for each of those. So for file shares, it was, okay, what department does this belong to? We're going to create a team drive for that, or a shared drive for that, or whatever it was. And it was, okay, and here's the suggested plan. Here's the way we're going to do it. You have until X to tell us that's a bad idea for your team. Because if we wait for them to make the decision, they will never make the decision. And so we looked at that way. And part of the conversation with leadership was we even got a third-party consulting company come in and say, okay, hey, if we need to, we've got these old servers, and what is it going to cost to make this environment work? This is before Google, and it was, well, there's the number. Well, the reality is that's a leadership question of if you're going to spend that number, and what was the value of that. And we were already so heavily Google that it became a good exercise to work together to decide how we're going to spend our funds, because they're not unlimited. And so for us, it was more worth the time and effort to solve the rough edges of training people on how to use Google shared drives, going through the process of moving their documents there for them, setting up all those groups and the other things in Google was more worth it than spending tens of thousands of dollars on properly replacing our existing on-prem environment. The big kicker for us was we had an on-prem application that we use to run QuickBooks for our finance folks. And so we actually ended up outsourcing that to a third party who now we just pay them and they host QuickBooks for us as an app, and they worry about all making sure that that is running correctly. So that is more of a leadership question of talking with leadership about resources and funds and vision of this is why it's important for us to do, because if we're going to maintain this current ability, we have to budget appropriately for it. And if it's not doing anything for us. So right now I have at each campus, I have one mini tower computer as a print server for paper cut, as that bridge. Obviously that's going to change as this year goes on. And then I have a firewall and, other management things, but no actual AD infrastructure. We do keep a little bit of Azure AD around for two reasons. We have with our church management system, we do check scanning, and that is dependent on Windows computers. And so we prefer to do those in a managed way. So we have 4 total computers in Azure AD, and that is our check scanning computer and then our 2 finance people who we haven't migrated them to Chrome yet, just because it's 2 people. So it's not worth that pain.
Yeah. And I know you just mentioned, just because I know we talked about the printing thing a lot too, you said you have a print server at each location.
Mm-hmm.
That's not 100% required. So we do.
Correct.
Yeah, we have a single paper cut server that's actually Azure. All of our printing just goes over the WAN.
Yeah, our architecture we decided to go for. We looked at that a little bit. We made the decision. We use paper cut MF, so functionality for it's integrated at the copier. So the user experience. The whole reason we do that is because of the user experience. Paper cut MF is not free. It does cost us something, but the user experience for our volunteers and our staff has been worth it. And therefore our architecture currently, and we're running an older version right now, architecture kind of dictates the easy button is to put a print server at each site. But if we had a different, just contextual decisions.
Yep. And hey, I know there's a few other questions, but we've got to, Jason asked for us to jump back at 3:10 to jump into the whole community group section. But thanks for joining in. Definitely feel free to just chat me on Slack or throw out questions in the general channel. And there's plenty of people around that will be glad to help.
We don't take away Excel. I see that question sitting over there. For somebody that needs it and they're trained to use it, we don't take it away.
Yeah, I screenshotted those questions. So if anybody wants to jump in the Slack and have more discussions around those, we can definitely do so.
Cool. See y'all. Jump back to the Zoom, okay?